I was inside a house that looked like perfection. Glittering chandeliers, champagne glasses lifted high, and laughter polished for an audience I could not see. But the reflection in the gilded mirror betrayed something wrong. The woman smiling on the family's live stream was me, except I was standing in the corner, frozen, watching her wave. Her hand on the screen had 6 fingers. No one else seemed to notice. Then a knock rattled the glass doors. I turned and saw my mother-in-law outside, trembling in the snow, locked away, while the internet cheered for a happiness that did not exist. The Pierce mansion was dressed like a showroom of perfection, each ornament arranged with surgical precision. Pine garlands curved around marble columns, chandeliers dripped golden light onto crystal flutes, and a string quartet in the corner performed carols soft enough to blur into background applause. My husband's family thrived on appearances, and tonight the appearance was broadcast live. A Christmas spectacle polished for millions of strangers scrolling on their phones. I tried to smile, though the air tasted hollow. Cameras were tucked into the wreaths, LEDs blinking faintly as the family shifted their poses with rehearsed timing. On my phone, the live stream played back in real time, except the woman in the frame wasn't quite me. She was brighter, smoother, her eyes wide with the devotion of an actress. Her hand lifted a glass and waved, though mine was folded against my side. My stomach twisted when I counted 6 fingers on her screen reflection. No one around me blinked. They clinked glasses, embraced, and leaned into the cameras like worshipers bowing to a digital altar. Madison, my sister-in-law, whispered stage directions between her teeth. Tilt left, smile bigger, hold him closer. Everyone obeyed. Everyone but me. I drifted to the edge of the room where a gilded mirror stretched nearly floor to ceiling. My reflection there was honest. Shadows under my eyes, the set of my jaw tired from pretending. Yet even that mirror felt warped, bending the lines of my face just enough to remind me that nothing here reflected truth. A knock broke the music, soft but deliberate, against the French doors leading to the patio. I turned, pulse climbing. Through the glass, a shape moved in the snow. My mother-in-law, Carol, hunched inside a thin cardigan, her breath blooming into desperate clouds. She raised a hand, lips forming words I couldn't hear. Behind me, the laughter swelled, drowning her out. On my phone, the live stream showed her at the piano inside, smiling and playing carols for the children. I stepped closer to the door, heart hammering. "She's outside," I whispered. But when I glanced back, the family's eyes were locked on their screens, delighted by the digital Carol who played flawlessly. Madison caught me staring and pressed a finger to her lips. "Don't ruin the moment," she hissed, then turned back to the camera, her grin stretching wider. I slipped into the mudroom, hoping no one noticed. My hands shook as I fumbled with the lock. The deadbolt was reversed, rigged so it could only be sealed from inside. I pushed it free and pulled the door open. Cold air sliced across my face, stealing my breath. Carol staggered forward, catching my arm. Her fingers were icy, stiff as porcelain. "They don't want me in there," she whispered. Her voice cracked, fragile and certain. I ruined the story. I wrapped her in my coat, guiding her inside. But before I could close the door, a red light blinked above the frame. Another hidden camera. My phone buzzed with a new notification. I glanced down and saw the live stream angle shift, now showing me still at the dinner table, laughing along with everyone else. On the internet, the illusion continued. I led Carol into the shadow of the mudroom, away from the noise. "Why were you outside?" I asked, though dread already tightened in my chest. She pressed a shaking hand against her lips, eyes darting to the ceiling as though microphones bloomed there like mold. "They've locked me out for weeks. They say it's for the brand. They say the world doesn't want an old woman, only the story of one." Her tears froze against her cheeks. "Emma, they're rewriting me." I wanted to tell her she was safe now, but the words tasted false. My phone vibrated again, another notification. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. A new clip uploaded to the family's account showed Carol seated by the fire, laughing as Madison poured her champagne. The comments scrolled in rapid fire. Goals. Perfect family. Queen energy. But I had just pulled her in from the freezing dark. A noise snapped my head up, the creak of footsteps above us. I held my breath, the house alive with too many hidden eyes. In that moment, I understood. The Pierce family wasn't simply addicted to appearances. They had replaced reality with one of their own design. They had hired the kind of minds who could fabricate entire people, splicing truth and falsehood until even family became characters in a show. Carol clutched my wrist. Her lips formed a single word this time, slow and deliberate so I could not mistake it. Help? I nodded, though my stomach sank with the weight of a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Behind the closed doors, the music surged louder, the quartet striking into Silent Night with pristine harmony. But here, in the cold draft of the mudroom, I realized there was nothing silent and nothing holy about what I had walked into. The cameras would keep broadcasting joy, no matter how many truths froze outside. I learned quickly that confrontation was suicide. If I stormed into the glittering living room and screamed about Carol freezing on the porch, they would smother me with charm, record the outburst, and stitch me into the villain role. So I played a different part. I let my shoulders slump, my voice soften, and my eyes glaze as if I were overwhelmed by the pageantry. Madison smirked at my silence, assuming I was cowed. Patrick raised a toast in my direction, the benevolent patriarch rewarding obedience. They thought I was folding. In truth, I was watching. Every camera, every carefully staged shot, every glitch. That night, after slipping Carol into bed, I scrolled through the family's archived videos. In one clip, I was laughing in slow motion, head tipped back beneath fairy lights. I paused, dragged the frame forward, and felt my pulse spike. My right hand, no, her right hand, had 6 fingers. The deep fake had slipped. Somewhere behind the glossy illusion was a rushed algorithm, and behind that, human hands who had programmed it. I printed screenshots and hid them beneath the lining of my suitcase. Then I went further. Madison had left a laptop open in the kitchen, too confident in her control of the narrative to imagine anyone peeking. I copied what I could onto a flash drive, heart racing with each progress bar. Most files were folders of raw footage, each tagged with metadata. Buried in a directory marked legal, I found something colder. A scanned contract assigning portions of the Pierce estate. My name glowed at the bottom beside a signature. Except the strokes were wrong. The loop of the E was exaggerated, the M too even, each letter perfect in a way no human hand could replicate. It was my name, but it was not my writing. My signature had been forged, not by pen but by an AI system trained on scraps of my emails, bank slips, even birthday cards. I staggered back from the screen, bile in my throat. The contract transferred property into a trust that excluded Carol and gave controlling power to Patrick and Ethan. I was listed as consenting spouse. It meant, if uncontested, I had already agreed to betray the only woman who had shown me kindness here. The next morning, I returned to the performance. I let Madison drape a cashmere shawl over my shoulders for the cameras. I held Ethan's hand longer than comfort allowed, let my face soften until the watchers online would call me grateful. Inside, I felt the sharpness of steel against my ribs. If they thought I was weak, they would expose more. And they did. At brunch, Patrick leaned close, voice low enough for the microphones to miss. "You're adapting well, Emma. You understand the importance of family unity." His smile was polished granite. Signatures are just symbols, after all, meaning flows from the story we tell. I nodded, feigning innocence. Inside, I filed his words under evidence. That evening, I slipped into town under the guise of buying gifts. Instead, I found an old contact. Years ago, before corporate promotions pulled me into boardrooms, I had worked as a forensic auditor for a federal task force investigating tech-based fraud. One of the engineers we questioned then, a gifted coder named Daniel Liu, had disappeared after refusing to cooperate with the Pierce's PR empire. Through encrypted messages, I tracked him to a dim apartment above a bookstore. Daniel looked older, wary, his fingers twitching as if still coding in dreams. "I knew they'd eat you alive," he said before I explained. "They fired me when I refused to generate identity overlays. They wanted full-spectrum profiles, voices, gestures, signatures. With enough data, they could fake anyone into compliance." I showed him the screenshots, my six-fingered doppelganger, the signature on the trust. His jaw tightened. That's version 3 of their engine. Sloppy still, but dangerous. If they have your financial records, they can insert you into transactions. It won't just be contracts. They can make it look like you wired funds, laundered money, anything. The weight of it pressed down, like ice water. If I exposed the truth, I could bring the family down. But the cost was staggering. Millions followed their streams, convinced they were aspirational icons. Whole communities of fans believed the Pierces gave them hope. To unravel the illusion would mean shattering the faith of people desperate for a story brighter than their own. Back at the mansion, Carol was awake, her eyes glassy with fatigue. I sat by her bed, smoothing the blanket. Her hand, frail but insistent, clutched mine. She leaned close, whispering words that chilled me deeper than any snow. "They've tied you to it, Emma. They used your social security number. If they fall, you fall with them." I froze, her breath hot against my ear. She blinked slowly, tears slipping free. "They've made you their weapon." The music from downstairs swelled again. Another toast, another chorus for the cameras. My phone buzzed with comments pouring into the live stream, praising a family that didn't exist. And in the hush of Carol's room, I realized the truth. My face, my name, my very identity had already been rewritten into their script. The attack began with a headline, "Charity Angel or Financial Predator." A video attached showed me, or rather a distorted version of me, rifling through donation envelopes at a children's hospital gala. My fingers slipped bills into a clutch, my smile strained with greed. Within hours, the clip had spread across every platform. Hashtags multiplied like mold. "Sikran scammer wife," "Sing gold digger exposed." I knew the footage was false. I had never attended that gala, but the details were too sharp, too convincing. The tilt of my head, the cadence of my laugh. Madison and Patrick had unleashed their machine. This was no careless glitch. It was calculated, frame-perfect destruction. More followed. Photographs of me in Paris sipping wine beside a stranger labeled secret partner. Clips of me logging into offshore accounts. Even a fabricated voicemail, my voice declaring, "They'll never know how much I've taken." Each piece carried metadata that matched my devices, my accounts, my life. The illusion wrapped me tighter than my own memories. I reached for Ethan, desperate. "You know this isn't me." He held my gaze too long, then looked away. "Perception is stronger than truth, Emma. We can't fight the tide." His words struck like a blade. The world tilted further when I revisited the family's archives, hoping for proof of manipulation. Every photograph, every celebration, Christmas mornings, anniversary trips, even candid kitchen snapshots had been altered. In some, Carol was smiling, though I remembered her crying. In others, I was absent entirely, replaced by Madison's curated glow. My history had been rewritten in real time, each memory overwritten by synthetic certainty. Then came the final blow. My employer called, voice clipped and cautious. "Emma, given recent allegations, we can't maintain your position." They didn't say guilty. They didn't have to. Within hours, my access was revoked, my accounts disabled. Overnight, I became what the headlines claimed: unemployed, disgraced, an untrustworthy liability. I sat in Carol's room watching the frost grow on the edges of her window. "They've stolen everything," I whispered. She squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting my despair. Yet even her comfort couldn't anchor me. The floor kept falling away. When I tried to retaliate, sending screenshots to a journalist, offering to expose the glitches, the story flipped against me. "Desperate wife fabricates lies," one headline read. The press spun my evidence into paranoia, framing me as a manipulative fraud. Each attempt at truth became another nail in my coffin. The betrayal that cut deepest came wrapped in the scent of Ethan's cologne. I found him in the study with Patrick, signing a document. When I confronted him, his face was pale, eyes ringed with shadows. "It's for the best," he said softly. "You'll be safe if you step away. Dad's handling everything." "Safe?" My voice cracked. "You've erased me." The papers were unmistakable. An amendment to the trust, excising me entirely. Ethan had chosen loyalty to Patrick's empire over loyalty to me. That night, Daniel called with urgency in his tone. "Emma, check your accounts." I logged in and felt the ground vanish. My bank balances were zero, replaced with flagged transactions routing funds to shell companies overseas. Screenshots showed me authorizing transfers, each with the same forged signature. "They're not just smearing you," Daniel warned. "They're embedding you in their crimes. If investigators look, you'll be the linchpin of the entire scheme." I couldn't breathe. My life's work, my credibility, had evaporated into code written by men who believed stories mattered more than flesh. But the nightmare wasn't finished. The next morning, tabloids erupted with a new video. Me, standing on the patio, staring coldly through frosted glass as Carol collapsed in the snow. The footage was seamless, every detail meticulous. My coat, my posture, even the tightening of my jaw. The headline read, "Heartless daughter-in-law leaves mother to die." I watched in silence, nausea boiling in my stomach. Carol sat beside me, trembling, whispering, "It wasn't you, I know it wasn't you." But the world didn't. Comments flooded in, vicious and certain. "Monster. Lock her up. How could anyone marry her?" For the first time, I felt my grip on truth slipping. If everyone believed the lie, what difference did it make that I knew I hadn't done it? The cameras in the hall hummed softly, feeding illusions into millions of screens. And I understood. The long con wasn't just about inheritance or money. It was about ownership of reality itself. Patrick didn't want to defeat me. He wanted to erase me. And judging by the roar of approval online, he had already won. I had nothing left to lose, which meant I finally had room to fight. They had stolen my job, my reputation, my money, even my face. But there was one thing they hadn't taken. One thing they hadn't known existed. The old analog camera I had hidden in the rafters of the mudroom. I had installed it on instinct months ago when the first cracks in the family's perfection began to unsettle me. A relic from my auditing days. No internet connection, no software to hack, just film. I retrieved the cartridge with trembling fingers. The footage was grainy, black and white but undeniable. It showed Carol standing outside, breath crystallizing, pounding weakly on the glass. It showed Ethan, my husband, turning the lock with a deliberate twist, then walking away. There was no AI glitch, no six-fingered hand. Just truth. I took the evidence to the only person I trusted outside my shrinking world, Daniel. His eyes widened as he scanned the tape. This is gold. Analog is incorruptible. They can't claim deepfake when there's no digital seam to exploit. But if I hand this to the police, they'll bury it under lawsuits. Patrick's reach is too long, I said. Daniel tapped the table. Then we make it untouchable. He called in a favor, and 2 days later, I sat across from a gaunt man with restless eyes, a journalist known for dismantling tech empires from the shadows. His name was Victor Hale. He listened silently, then leaned forward. "Behind the fake," he said. "That's what I'll call it. A series. Episode by episode, dismantling their empire with proof no one can deny." Still, I hesitated. They'll claim I fabricated even this. Victor smiled thinly. Not if we burn it into the blockchain. Once the footage is hashed, it becomes permanent, time-stamped, immutable. Even if they erase you from every platform, the truth will live outside their reach. So we did it. We converted the analog film, hashed it into a blockchain ledger, and sent the link to a network of allies prepared to mirror it across the globe. When the first article in Behind the Fake dropped, it struck like a match in a room filled with gas. The video played in millions of homes. Ethan's hand on the deadbolt. Carol's frail frame collapsing against the glass. My voice cracked when I watched it again, not just for the cruelty, but for the finality. It was him. Not Patrick, not Madison, not faceless programmers. Ethan had made the choice. The internet that once jeered now howled in fury. Comments flipped overnight. How could they do this? Justice for Carol. Shut them down. Sponsors scrambled to cut ties. Fashion brands erased Madison's face from campaigns. Talk shows invited experts to analyze the footage frame by frame, each one concluding the same. It was real. Patrick's empire unraveled like cheap thread. Investigations launched into their finances. Contracts evaporated. The mansion gates filled with reporters demanding answers. Madison wept for the cameras, but the tears rang hollow. No one believed in their perfection anymore. Yet triumph felt like ash in my mouth. I stood in the doorway of Carol's room as she watched the broadcast replay. She saw Ethan locking her out, saw her own body collapsing into snow while the world clapped for a lie. She pressed her hands to her face and sobbed. Not for the world, not for her reputation, but for the son she had raised. He was my boy, she whispered, and he chose their story over me. I wanted to hold her, to tell her justice mattered. But what comfort is justice when betrayal comes from your own blood? I sat beside her, the roar of the internet muffled by her grief. For every sponsor that fled, every contract canceled, her heart cracked further. When Patrick's arrest warrant went public, when Madison was subpoenaed, when Ethan's name appeared in official documents as an accomplice, the dominoes fell faster than I could follow. But instead of satisfaction, I felt a hollow chill. The empire collapsed. The world cheered. And in the quiet corners of the ruined mansion, Carol whispered her son's name, like a prayer already lost. Victory had arrived, but it tasted nothing like freedom. For a moment, I thought I had won. Headlines carried my name beside words like truth teller and whistleblower. Strangers sent messages calling me brave, a survivor. I became the unwilling face of a movement against deception. But triumph, I soon discovered, has sharp edges. With the spotlight came scrutiny. My inbox filled with questions not about the Pierces, but about me. Where had I studied? Why had I stayed married so long? What secrets did I keep? Netizens combed through my photos, dissecting my clothing, my voice, even the tilt of my smile. Some praised me, but others called me opportunistic, hungry for fame. She's using her mother-in-law's suffering to build a brand, one post read. A new influencer born from tragedy. The irony cut deep. I had wanted truth, not celebrity. Yet my face trended daily turned into memes, my words repackaged into sound bites. The poison of victory seeped in slowly until I barely recognized myself in the reflection online. Carol suffered most. Every time she stepped near a window, a photographer lurked beyond the fence. She stopped walking in the garden, stopped leaving her room altogether. "They're still watching," she whispered, clutching the curtains closed. The same world that once ignored her suffering now consumed her pain as entertainment. She had become a symbol against her will. I promised her I would protect her, but promises in the age of surveillance are fragile things. It was Daniel who unearthed the truth behind the collapse. His contacts in underground forums traced the Pierce's technology back to a larger network, an AI syndicate selling deepfake services to the highest bidder. They weren't just forging family bliss, they were building governments, celebrities, financial frauds. The Pierces were one lucrative client among many. Patrick, the man who had orchestrated so much of my personal ruin, wasn't the mastermind after all. He was merely a customer, a pawn in a system far larger. The real puppet master remained hidden, cloaked by servers and pseudonyms, operating an empire that thrived on bending reality for profit. The revelation should have given me closure. Instead, it hollowed me. If Patrick wasn't the architect, then my battle had toppled a single house in a city of illusions. For every family empire exposed, 100 more thrived unseen. Then came the betrayal I never saw coming. Sophia Reynolds had been my closest friend since college, a sharp PR strategist who once guided nonprofits through scandals with a surgeon's precision. She had been the only one outside the family who called me during the storm, who said she believed me when the deepfakes spread. I clung to her voice as proof I wasn't alone, until Daniel showed me the receipts. Payments funneled from the syndicate to a consultancy firm bearing her initials, her name in email threads discussing narrative spin and target persona alignment. My face listed under case study. I confronted her. Her smile was brittle, rehearsed. It wasn't personal, Emma. It was business. They would have destroyed you anyway. I just managed the story. You sold me, I said, voice raw. She didn't deny it. That night, the last wall fell. My phone lit with notifications, but these weren't trending hashtags. They were warnings from Daniel, his messages urgent. Your data's out. My breath stuttered as I clicked the link. A dark forum page glowed with my name, my address, my social security number, bank history, even private emails. My life carved into raw data, auctioned to strangers. Threads bloomed with offers, identity theft, blackmail packages, cloned voice files. It was the final irony. After surviving their story, I had become the story again, dissected and consumed, stripped to pieces for profit. I shut the laptop and stared into the dark, the echo of Sophia's voice ringing in my head. It was business. For them, perhaps it was. For me, it was the death of the last illusion that safety could be reclaimed. And yet, somewhere deep beneath the fear, a flicker of resolve burned. If my life could be dismantled so easily, then maybe it could also be rebuilt, not by returning to what was lost, but by creating something untouchable. But that choice, I knew, would come at a cost I wasn't sure I could bear. The night my data was dumped onto the dark web, I realized I had been fighting the wrong war. For months, I had chased headlines, clawing for the public's sympathy, battling each deepfake with another piece of evidence. But the game was designed for me to lose. Truth could not keep up with fabrication when fabrication was infinite. If I stayed on that battlefield, I would always be one step behind, forced into the role of defendant in a trial without end. So I stopped. I shut down my social media, ignored the reporters clawing at my gate, and turned off the lights in every room of the mansion. For the first time since this began, silence pressed against the windows like a balm. In that silence, I saw my choice clearly. I could keep chasing the spotlight, or I could protect what mattered. Carol sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea with trembling hands. Her eyes searched mine, not for answers, but for peace. No more cameras, she whispered. No more stories. I reached across the table and covered her hand. No more. The next day, I made the sacrifice. I stepped away from the interviews, the podcasts, the rallies chanting my name. Fame was a poisoned chalice. Instead, I disappeared into work no one could photograph. I reconnected with Daniel and with Victor, but this time it wasn't for another expose. It was to build something new. We called it the Clear Door Foundation. At first, it was nothing more than a rented office above a shuttered cafe, a handful of laptops, and our conviction. But conviction can be contagious Within weeks, volunteers arrived, lawyers who had watched their clients ruined by forgeries, engineers who had left syndicates in disgust, survivors of digital impersonation desperate to reclaim their identities. We didn't fight for headlines. We fought for safeguards, databases of verified signatures, watermarking systems for video, secure identity vaults stored across decentralized networks. Every project was designed not for fame, but for durability, to give victims a weapon stronger than denial. I changed too. The Emma who once walked into the Pierce mansion in a designer dress, eager to belong, was gone. In her place stood someone leaner, sharper, no longer bound by the need for approval. I had been the victim of a story written by others. Now I wrote my own. It wasn't easy. For every door we opened, the syndicate tried to close 2 more. Sophia resurfaced under a new alias, whispering to clients that we were overreaching, that no system could outpace deception. Perhaps she was right. But our work wasn't about speed. It was about permanence. The first breakthrough came when a victim of political deepfakes used our verification system in court and won. The precedent set fire to the movement. Lawmakers began drafting regulations based on our framework. Suddenly, the clear door protocol became a phrase spoken not in underground forums, but in Senate hearings. I watched the shift with a strange mix of pride and disbelief. A year earlier, I had been branded a scammer, erased from my own bank accounts, my image twisted into cruelty. Now my name was attached to reform, to resilience. Yet I kept myself hidden from the spotlight. I had no desire to become a symbol again. Instead, I let the foundation speak for itself. On a quiet winter morning, I stood with Carol on the porch of a modest home we had moved to after leaving the mansion behind. Snow dusted the railing, but she didn't shiver this time. She looked out across the yard, her breath steady. "It's better here," she said. "It's honest," I replied. Inside, sunlight spilled through a glass door we had installed deliberately. No curtains, no filters, no distortions, just clear glass. I often stood before it, watching my reflection. It wasn't smoothed or perfected, but it was real. My hair fell unevenly. My eyes carried shadows. My mouth curved into something between exhaustion and resolve. For the first time in years, I trusted the image staring back. I didn't know if the syndicate would ever be destroyed. I didn't know if the world would ever value truth more than spectacle. But I had learned something deeper. Survival wasn't about winning the story others told. It was about refusing to surrender your own. As the day dimmed, I caught my reflection in that clear glass door once more. No filters, no edits, no illusion. Just me. And for the first time, that was enough.